Hi guys, so today we're going to be making this bookmark right here. It is made to be put over the corner of your book to help mark your page, and mine has a little tassel on it. I'm not going to show you how to make a tassel, but I will show you how to make the rest of the bookmark. So stay tuned. We're going to take and you're going to need 3 squares of quilter's cotton, or your fabric of choice, but I prefer quilter's cotton. It's just easier to work with. And each one of these squares is going to be 3 1/2 inches by 3 1/2 inches. And you're going to take and you're going to make sure to put your pieces. One of them is going to get folded into a triangle. So you take your opposite corners like that. Actually, I'm going to use this one since it's a little bit flatter. But you take and you fold it like that and finger press the entire thing so that it stays vaguely in a triangular shape, like that. And so you're laying the right side up on this one, and you're going to take and lay this diagonally like so onto this one. And then this one is going to go right sides down like that. Now, what you're going to do is you're going to take and start sewing. You're going to start sewing right here in the middle of the side that's opposite of your corner, because if you start somewhere over here, that's where your hole is going to be to turn it inside out, and this thing will go really weird if you try to do it that way. So do it on the side that does not have the triangle added, and that way you have your hole, that way you can flip it the right way. So what you're going to do is you're going to start here, you're going to sew up, around, down, across, and then up just a little bit, and then stop and knot it off. That way that it's good solid stitching. I'm using a running back stitch to do the whole thing, and then we'll flip it inside out and I'll show you from there, okay? Make sure that you're going to wear your thimble. This is going to help you with your stitching, especially once you get to where the triangle is, because the fabric's a little bit thicker because it's 4 layers instead of 2. And that just helps you push the needle through. I wear mine on my middle finger. Some people wear it on their ring finger because some people push like that when they sew. I have a tendency to rest it on the side of my finger like so and push through that way. Or sometimes if it's really difficult, then I'll just take my hand loose of the needle and then just literally push it through with just the tip. You can do it either way, whatever floats your boat. This just works the best for me. This is actually my great-grandmother's thimble, and it just so happens we were the same size. So I have this one, and the way you can tell if your thimble fits, you don't have to force it on your finger, and if you shake it like that, it doesn't come off. And people talk about, oh, well, I can't use a thimble. It's just uncomfortable. It's hard to do. That's true, but the reason is because you don't wear it. The way I train myself to use a thimble is to take and do daily tasks with it. I didn't use this one to train because, you know, it's special. But I bought like a cheap one at Walmart that was the same size, popped it on my finger that I knew I was going to wear it on all the time, and then just kept it on. And so I'd be sitting there at work just typing, or I'd be doing something and I would have my thimble on all the time. And eventually your hands get used to this being on your hand. Just as soon as you get up in the morning to go to work or whatever, pop it on your finger, and when you get home at night, you can take it off. But that way that you're used to using it. All right, so let's get started sewing. So I'm starting on the side that is not got the triangle inserted. Now you're going to want to take and start at the edge, but make sure that you are close enough in so that you are not going to take, you don't want to leave it out too far, because then you're going to have issues with it fraying and your threads coming loose. But you don't want it too far in either, because then you're going to take and run into the problem of your seam allowance making your bookmark a little bit too bulky. So the way that I'm doing this, normally I would catch the loop and like just loop it over the edge here, but that causes a problem. So what I just did, I tied my knot and I pulled it through to the bottom to where it was snug, but not pulling it through. And I'm going to take and do a couple of quick back stitches to get it to stay. So to do a back stitch, you just back up a little bit from where you came through the fabric, and then you're just going to take and go through. And when you pull, it makes kind of a loop there. and then I'm going to do it one more time. Now when you have a line of stitching, you're going backwards, and so now there's a loop here, a stitch. So whenever you come up through the fabric, you're over here, you're going to come back down in between these 2 points, in between that stitch, and keep going, and that makes a back stitch. Now you can do an entire line of back stitches and it's going to be a very strong seam, but since this is not going to get any real strain on it, I'm going to do a running back stitch where I'm just kind of going up and down through the fabric about 3 stitches, and then I'll do a back stitch. And that just keeps it, if the thread does come untied or pops through or something, it can only go so far before it stops. This comes in handy a lot. Back in the day, before sewing machines were a thing and everything was hand done, running back stitches were usually used to do stuff like skirt seams that run vertically, because though it has to hold the weight of the skirt, it doesn't really get much stress other than that. Like, you're not going to be pulling on these seams, and they don't like get brushed a lot like if it was a pants leg or a coat sleeve or even a dress sleeve or a dress bodice. So you need something that's strong enough to hold it together, but you don't want anything that's going to take so much work and time when there's no need in extra reinforcement being used. So I've done 2 back stitches to get it started, and then once I get my loop undone here, I'm going to take and just go ahead and start doing my running back stitch, and you're going to watch me do that here. So the way that I do it, I take and I rest my finger on the middle of the needle so that I can like maneuver it back and forth, because you're not moving the fabric, it stays the same, you're moving the needle. And if I were at a different angle, then I would show you that it kind of ends up doing this motion here. And as you can see, I have my middle finger and my thumb resting on the actual needle here, and they're the ones that are pushing it. And that way, if I do need to reach up with my middle finger to push something in, I can. But otherwise, I use this first knuckle right here to help grip and push through, like that. And now with running stitches, if you pull them too tight, they're going to do that right there, and it's going to get wrinkled up. Make sure you don't do that. You just want them taut, not tight, and then you do your back stitch, and that'll keep them from doing that from now on. And that's actually one of the biggest problems when it comes to using running stitches for constructing garments and stuff, because if you take and you're in the middle of constructing everything, it's going to hold the seam together. But the problem happens whenever you're walking or something and that thread gets snagged on something, it's going to pull, and your entire pants leg or whatever is going to suddenly start drawing up and wrinkling because it's caught that thread and it's not been secured ever so often, so it's going to just pull the whole thing up. And then you've got the problem of your thread is hanging out, your pants leg or your skirt is all wrinkled. Like, what do you do then? Well, then you have to smooth it back out, or you just have to rip the entire thing out and redo it. I've seen people do just running stitches on stuff before. I've seen historical garments constructed with just running stitches. Honestly, that has to take some skill, because it is not easy. Because once it starts pulling, honestly, there's not really much help for it. But then again, a lot of historical sewing and stuff, and I say historical because honestly not many people hand sew anymore, which is a shame, because honestly you can sew much finer, better stitches by hand sewing than you can with a machine. Now, I've knotted off my thread. I'm cutting it right now. Okay, so I made a little bit of a boo-boo. Whenever I started, I made my hole very small. I'm not sure if I can fit this through here. No, there's no way I can. So this is what you can do if you make this same mistake. For me, I could take and stitch another knot a little further down and stitch all the way to the corner and then knot it again and leave the thread in here and just cut the very end and pull it through just a little bit so that the hole is wider, and then flip it, and then when you sew it, the tail is tucked inside so you're not going to see it. But that way that I can expand that hole, because otherwise I'm never going to be able to flip this inside out. So let's go ahead and tie us a new knot here. Ta-da! Alright, so now comes the interesting part, because I need to, let's put it about right here. So this time when I'm coming through, if you ever have this problem, this time I'm going to catch the loop and pull it tight. And I'm going to actually back stitch this entire thing. That way that I don't have to worry about this coming undone, because I made the boo-boo, so I want to make sure that it is solidly stitched. It's not going to be under any strain or anything, but just in case, because I am cutting the thread, with it being a running back stitch beforehand, it's going to take and have the potential to come undone over time, and I want to make sure that this is good. So I'm just sewing right over that same stitch line that I had before, doing my back stitches. And back stitches are fine when you're making stuff. They just take a little bit longer because, you know, it's kind of like a 2 steps forward, 1 step back kind of stitch. They look fine, they perform well, they just take some time to get done. And that is perfectly okay. So I made it almost to the corner. I'm going to go ahead and tie it off here. There's no need to really go all the way to the corner. That would be overkill. But now that it's tied, I can go ahead and trim this like that. And now my beginning knot is here. So I'm going to take and flip these over so that I can actually get to the sharp point. And I'm going to cut that stitch, and I'm going to cut these back stitches that I did at the very beginning, which is easier said than done. There we go. And now I should be able to just pull the thread like that, get my threads out, and now I should be loose almost. Let me cut these threads. Alright, my hole is bigger, and so now I don't have to worry about it coming and unraveling, and it's done. So now let's flip it inside out right quick. Now you can do this with a little piece of interfacing, triangle shape to go in the triangle, and square to go inside the thing. It's going to be a little bit smaller than the dimensions of the actual square that we used. Because we used a 3.5 inch square, you would do it at a 3 inch. And you can do that if you want to. It's not super necessary because of the way that this is designed. It still works even if it's a little bit on the floppy side. That's not the end of the world. Oh, I forgot to do one thing. I didn't clip my corners. Okay, so here's a tip for you. Let me flip this back inside out because that's going to be an issue if I don't do that. Whenever you have corners, when you're sewing something like this, there is a thing called clipping the corners, which is so that they turn out smooth. Let me get my big shears so that I can cut things easier. Alright, so do not clip your line of stitching that you had, but you're going to take and cut the corner off of each one of the corners, except for the one that I ended on a corner, like I'm not supposed to. But do as I say, not as I do. But don't clip your stitching. Now what happens is when it flips inside out, these are gonna overlap each other inside, and it's gonna make a sharp corner like that, but on the outside. But don't clip the one that you're working on if you do choose to end it on a corner. Well, yeah, let's go ahead. Just don't clip your knot or your stitching like that. All right, so now let's flip it inside out, and that should make it a lot easier. I was wondering why it wasn't turning inside out the right way, and that would explain it. I did it wrong. And that's another thing about sewing. A lot of people talk about, oh, well, I just mess it up. Okay, we'll just do it again. And like rip the stitches out and re-stitch it. It's not the end of the world. The fun thing about stuff like this is it's all an experiment. This is honestly kind of like a science, because it's all experimental. You really can't do anything wrong per se. And if you do get something quote unquote wrong, then you can always just do it again. Like right now, I have made a boo-boo, and you can't see it because you're a little bit further away than I am, but in one of these corners right here, let's see, can you see that? I have accidentally not caught my fabric whenever I was stitching the first time. So the way I stitch around the edges, I do this specifically because I had the same problem when I created this one. I do a buttonhole stitch all the way around the edge of it just to make sure that it stays shut. That way if I do have gaps like that, they're gonna be closed and nobody will ever know. Which is really nice when you need to, cheat the system a little bit. So I'm gonna take and show you how to do that in just a second. The very first thing I wanna show you though, once you get it turned inside out, you should have a pocket and then your flat piece on the back, like that. And that's basically how you do it. What you're gonna do is now we're gonna stitch up this hole, and I'm gonna show you how to do that. What you're gonna do is fold your fabric in. Mine's already trying to turn itself inside out anyway, so that works out nicely. But you take and you fold it to where it makes a nice smooth-ish line, because again, we're covering it with buttonhole stitches, so nobody's really gonna be able to tell. But you're gonna fold it like that so it looks like the rest of your seams. And then you're gonna just take and, I guess it's a whip stitch. Honestly, I don't know what it's called. I just do it. I never really learned the name. I think it's still considered a whip stitch, but I'm not 100% sure. But what you're gonna do is you're gonna stitch in between these two flaps. So you're gonna catch the very inside of that flap and pull your thread through. Well, not through, but I just did. But you're gonna catch your loop. So don't pull it too quickly like I did. I got too excited. All right, so you're gonna catch your loop like that, and then you're just gonna go straight across and catch the inside of the other edge, like that. And it's gonna pull it together like that. I'm gonna tuck down my little thread antenna there because it's gonna bug me. I'll just cut it off in a minute. But anyway, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take this and I'm gonna catch the very, very edges across each one of these. And it's gonna kind of loop across it. You can technically sew inside of that as well, and this stitch could be invisible, but I'm not too worried about the way it looks because this is more for function than just being pretty. But honestly, once you put the buttonhole stitches over top of it, you will never even know that these whip stitches are there. Whip stitches are super easy to do. They don't have to be super close or anything. You just kind of do your thing. Just don't make them too far down on the fabric, otherwise you'll start pinching the edge, and we don't want that because it'll look kind of funky. But as far as this goes, it should be fine. Also, another thing, don't bend this around your finger for tension, because if you do, it's going to come out curved and it's not going to want to sit flat. So I'm trying to remember that as I go, but that's a really bad habit that I have. It's the same problem that a lot of people have if they're tailors. First starting out, there's a process called pad stitching, which you saw in the video where I made the little clutch purse. If you are pad stitching and you put it on a curved surface while you're pad stitching, it's going to pre-form your fabric into the shape that you need it. So whenever you're doing collars or lapels for jackets and stuff like that, you're pad stitching down, and you have to use a certain kind of form and hold it a certain way while you're pad stitching. Otherwise, it's going to come out a different shape than what you're supposed to. So that's a tip for you. Get this down. Okay, so now it is now stitched closed, and as you can see, you can definitely tell that it's been stitched, but we're going to go over it in just a minute with buttonhole stitches. And so let me rethread my needle and I'll be right back. All right, so I'm going to take and actually start on the edge that I just finished. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take my needle and I'm going to put it inside of this corner that I've got going here. And I'm going to come through right there, just a little ways from that corner, because you don't ever want to start on the corner, otherwise it always comes out funky. And I'm pulling my knot inside of the work, that way that it's hidden. Sneaky, sneaky, I know. Okay, so now here comes the fun part, because with buttonhole stitches, you'll get your own hang of which way you need to go on it, but it's a little bit finicky. I always flip it and I go from left hand to right hand with them. So if you need to go the opposite direction because you're left-handed, do the exact opposite of what I'm saying. So my thread is on my left-hand side of the needle, my needle's here. So what you're gonna do, I put my needle halfway through like that, reach under this thread and grab the one that was coming up through the fabric, and it goes under the butt of the needle there, and then it goes under the front of the needle there. Don't get your loop caught. And so what that does, when you pull your needle through, it's gonna make a knot. But this knot is movable. You can see it starting to happen right there. Whenever you pull it, pull away from the edge like that, and now the knot is gonna be on the outside edge. And so you're gonna move over a stitch, and you're gonna do the exact same thing. Under, under, pull. And what this does, this makes a chain of stitches that line the edge of your, whatever you're making. This is what you use traditionally to do hand-done buttonholes. Now, if you choose to do a hand-done buttonhole, they are not the prettiest in the world unless you're really, really good at it. Some people are excellent at doing buttonholes. I'm kind of mediocre. Mine turn out functional and good enough, and they look okay. But I know people that make beautiful hand-done buttonholes. I'm not one of those people. I haven't had enough practice at it, honestly, to do beautiful buttonholes. But the more you practice with sewing, the better and finer your stitches can get. My goodness, Victorian people used to take, and in instructional manuals at that time, that it used to say that they wanted you to do a stitch every 3 or 4 threads. And so every single stitch that you did, you would take and pick up 2 threads and then skip over 3 or 4. And so every stitch that you had was itty, itty bitty. And I mean itty, itty bitty. All right, so again, goes through the fabric, under, pull through, just like that. And you're gonna continue this all the way around the edge, and then you're gonna connect it up with the ones that you have at the beginning. And then I'll take and join you when that's done. All right, so as you can see, my buttonhole stitches going all the way around are done, and this thing is mostly flat. So now what you're gonna do is you're gonna run buttonhole stitches all along the edge of that flap, That's just because it's going to be sliding on and off of the edges of your book enough that you should probably make sure that that edge is properly secured. That way that it doesn't get as much wear and tear. That's kind of the point of the buttonhole stitch. That's the reason you bind the edges of them, even if you're doing them by machine, instead of just cutting straight through the fabric, because that hole for your button is going to take a lot of wear, because the button will be going back and forth a lot, and eventually it'll wear down the fabric. And it's the same thing for this. Even though it's a bookmark, it's not going to get as much wear and tear as, let's say, a buttonhole, but it still has the potential to really get kind of messed up. So you want to make sure that all of your edges are taken care of. And your buttonhole stitches don't have to be super duper small. Around the edges, my buttonhole stitches got a little bit bigger as I went. And that was mostly just because I'm lazy and didn't want to sit there and do the entire thing in teeny tiny little buttonhole stitches. Could have, but chose not to. And speaking of knots, I actually have a knot right here, which is my least favorite thing because I have to deal with this. So give me a second. Okay. So now that I've got the that knot situated, I'm just going to continue with these buttonhole stitches the entire way down, and that way that we can get this little thing done. And you can do it in any color fabric you want, any color thread you want. You just want to make sure that you're careful about your thread looping up like mine did, which is what caused that knot. Make sure that you buttonhole stitch your edges, that way that they're nice and sturdy for whoever you're making this for. And you can add decorative stitches anywhere that you want. I recommend, if you do decorative stitches, make sure that you put your finger inside of this thing, that way that you are not stitching through the entire thing and, sewing your pouch closed. Otherwise it won't be able to actually function as your bookmark. And that would be a problem, because then you wouldn't be able to actually use it. It would just be a decorative little quilted looking thing, which, is cute enough, but it, wouldn't be very functional. I mean, what would you do with it? I guess you could use it as a very small drink holder or something, like a coaster. Though I don't expect that would last very, very long. But yeah, so let's get this done, and then I'll show you a couple of the decorative things that I did on the other one, because I'm not gonna replicate that on this. Not on this one, because I'm going to do a different design, because this is for a different person. But it will kind of give you an idea of what you can use and do on your own. If you embroider, then you already know some of the stuff that you could put on it, because you can always embroider, which is pretty much what I'm going to be doing to this one. But the other one, I just did some simple stitches just to hold the layers together and to make it look a little bit nicer. And it also ended up with a tassel that I made. If you know how to make a tassel, feel free to do that and attach it to the edge of yours as well. But honestly, tassels are a little bit of a pain to make. Not so much a pain to make, they're more of a pain to attach in the way that I did that one. But yeah, so that is my last buttonhole stitch for this end. Make sure that it is pulled snug, and let me run a knot. Just like that. Okay, then I can just go like this and snip it right off. Alright, and so that is what it should look like, and it's pretty well flat. But if you take and you grab the 2 pieces of cloth, it pulls and fluffs and everything. So that's why I say add decorative stitching along the edges and like in the areas in between up here in the pouch. You want it up here on the outside and outside right here. And that way it's holding all the layers together. With mine, I stitched a big triangle in the lower part, and then I stitched, it kind of looks like, if you're familiar with The Legend of Zelda, like the Triforce type thing up at the top. I didn't intend for that to be like that. I just kind of, I went with the triangle theme and then added a triangle going the opposite direction in the middle, and once I was finished, I was like, oh, somebody's gonna point that out. And then I added my tassel on the corner and made it all super decorative. So it can be decorative or it can be plain, but either way, they're super functional and they're great little gift ideas to take and give to somebody. So thank you for watching. As always, please do go to the Gaston County Public Library's YouTube page and like, share, and subscribe for more library content. Bye.